Hello and welcome to today's edition of Liberty Action Network TV. I'm your host, Doreen Finkel, and today we're going to be talking about Common Core, what it is, who sponsors it, what parents have to know, and what we can do about it. And our guest today is the Commissioner of Carroll County, Maryland, Richard Rothschild. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Doreen. Pleasure to be here with you. Thank you.
Can you give us a background about what Common Core is?
Well, yes. About 7 or 8 years ago, two organizations, the National Governors Association and an organization called the Council of Chief State School Officers, received funding from both the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the federal government to create a set of standards. And their stated goal with these state-sponsored standards was to create a set of expectations as to what students are expected to learn in public schools across the country.
So, in other words, are these standards general, like for every first grader? Every first grader has to know the same thing?
Yes, these standards would apply to every state and every school system that adopted the Common Core across the United States.
So, there is a term that my friends bring up, and I'm going to mention here, it's called Commie Core. Isn't that's what the communists do? They make everything standard.
Well, I mean, what you're really getting at here, Doreen, is the question of whether or not this is a de facto attempt, an end run to try to federalize education. And I believe that it is. There are already federal laws that prohibit the federalization or the takeover of the school system by the federal government, and that includes No Child Left Behind, the Department of Education Organization Act, and the General Education Provisions Act. And two former attorneys with the United States Department of Education actually commented on that. I'm going to read their quote. Their names were Robert Eitel and Kent Talbert, and they said, quote, "These standards and assessments will ultimately direct the course of study in most states across the nation, running the risk that states will become little more than administrative agents for a nationalized program of instruction. The department has simply paid others to do that which it is forbidden to do," unquote.
Wow. So I want to go back to a group that you had mentioned, the National Governors Association, and there was another one, the Council of Chief State School Officers, or known as CCSSO. And then there's also Bill Gates. Can you tell us what his role is in this?
Yes. These two organizations are nonprofit organizations, and of course it creates the appearance that they're working independently. But the problem, if you want to know who controls an organization, look at the money trail. And they're receiving their money from two primary sources. Number one is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which provided $150 million. And number two, the federal government. So it's my assertion that if organizations are primarily funded through government money, then obviously it brings their neutrality into question.
I did a little research, and I want to read this to you. Common Core is now an organization based out of Washington, D.C. It is a 501c3 nonprofit founded by Lynn Munson. Munson is a former deputy chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities and author of Exhibitionism, Art in an Era of Intolerance, that was written during her tenure at the American Enterprise Institute for Public Policy Research. The curriculum itself focuses on the arts and the humanities. And through curriculum mapping, that's a term they use, meaning outlining a set of sequential objectives for each subject and grade level, Common Core attempts to, what you had said, standardize everything. So going back to standardization, this sounds nice, but is it really for the individual?
Well, I obviously have concerns with this, and I'm going to approach it from a different perspective. Let's not even consider whether or not a parent may agree or disagree with what is going to be taught and tested. My argument is that every parent should be concerned because of the fact this creates a command structure. You know, in the military there's a term called command, control, communications, intelligence for top-down control. Well, this creates the equivalent of a military command structure which begins at the White House. And the bottom line is this: whether you agree or disagree with whoever is in office, once this infrastructure is in place, anytime the White House or Washington, D.C. wants to inject something into the curriculum, all they need to do is dangle money. in front of the Governors Association and the Chief State School Officers to create a new module. All they have to do is dangle money in front of the governors to adopt that new module, and through the coercive use of grant funds, they can force anything into the curriculum that they want. And this should trouble every parent, because today if a parent doesn't like what's being taught in a public school, they can complain to their superintendent. They can vote their Board of Education members out of office. But once this gets in place, this stuff is copyrighted. It cannot be changed, and this will take control away from our parents, away from our communities, and ultimately place it in the hands of he who has the gold, and that will be the federal government.
To control the minds of our youngsters.
Certainly they control the curriculum, and indirectly they have the ability. There's the ability to abuse our public school systems and potentially turn them into propaganda institutes for an agenda driven by the federal government.
I was a teacher for 10 years in a public school system, and I will tell you that having a class of, let's say, 20 kids, I know as a teacher, each one of those students learned different. So why was it that Washington is calling the shots of what these kids need to know? I was actually a teacher in Paterson, New Jersey. How would that benefit a particular district?
Well, you raised a very important issue, and I'm going to slightly restate it. The question that we're raising here is whether or not having national standards is going to result in increases in performance. Well, let me tell you what the Brookings Institute had to say about this in 2012. What they said was there's no correlation between standards versus performance, and therefore little support for the expectation that this will improve learning. And furthermore, there are some school systems in states like Massachusetts that arguably already have education standards that are stricter and more aggressive than Common Core. So there's very little evidence, actually there's virtually no evidence to indicate that having a nationalized curriculum and testing will improve overall performance. Now, there's an argument for it. It increases mobility. A child can go from one state to another and encounter essentially the same curriculum. But I don't think that rises to the threshold of justifying a de facto nationalization of standards.
And as a teacher, I will tell you that I was always making adjustments to the objectives that were being taught, to individualize to the student's personality and how they needed to learn. And that's where I see this as a problem.
Well, it is a problem, and taking it back to the parents and our teachers, teachers are already frustrated in our public school systems because they feel they're handcuffed. And it limits their ability to apply their own creativity, their own ingenuity, their own judgment to adjust curriculum and teaching methods for what works best for each individual student in their classroom. And what Common Core will become is one more set of handcuffs that will shackle our teachers.
And you had touched upon the copyright and the public licensing and all that. And I wanted to ask you, how are the districts being, I would say, coerced into adopting this? What? Obviously, there's funding or
a fair
money.
question. I mean, across the United States, states and counties are strapped for money. And when I ran for office 3 years ago, I coined a term called grant coercion. It's very simple. If I want you to give up one of your constitutional freedoms or give up one of your rights, if I'm the federal government, I dangle a check in front of you. And what I say is do what I want you to do rather than what you have the right to do, and I will give you a check. And unfortunately, across the United States, elected officials betray their oath of office to the Constitution. They betray their citizens' freedoms, they betray the autonomy of their school systems, and they say, I want the check, and they sell their freedoms away to get those grant checks, and that's exactly what's happening in America today.
So it's almost like coercion.
It is a form of coercion. That's exactly
it's
what
like
it is.
If you don't do what we say, we're not going to give you funding.
That's exactly what they do. They overtax us, and across the United States, whether we're talking about transportation, land use, the environment, education, the federal government exceeds its constitutional boundaries by telling local and state officials, if you don't do what we want, we will not give you your money back in the form of grants. It is a form of coercion, and it is allowing the federal government to exceed its constitutional boundaries.
Wow. Let's go to Race to the Top. Okay. Race to the Top is a program by the United States Department of Education. It's actually a contest created to spur innovation and reforms in state and local district K through 12 education. It's funded by the Educational Recovery Act as part of American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009, and was announced by President Barack Obama and the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, on July 24th of 2009. The states were awarded points for satisfying certain educational policies, such as performance-based standards, often referred to as the annual professional performance review, for teachers and principals, and complying with Common Core standards, lifting caps on charter schools, turning around the lowest performing schools, and building data systems. It is a point in which states compete with one another over criteria. Who judges the states on this certain criteria?
That's very simple. The federal government. See, the federal government will say that programs like Race to the Top and Common Core are voluntary. But they only create the illusion of being voluntary, because if you don't comply with the mandates and you don't train children to the standards that are established, you don't get the money. So they are not voluntary. It's like me saying, I'll take you out to dinner, you can have anything you want, you can have anything on the menu as long as you order what I want. It's disingenuous. It is no question control.
So what is their qualification to judge? I mean, do the states, does the federal government actually have a qualification?
Well, in Common Core, they claim that these standards will increase performance. But I want to point out a couple things with respect to that. Number one, they have no evidence. They have no proof of concept. We have the Brookings Institute said there doesn't seem to be any correlation. So the fact of the matter is we really have no data to indicate that the government has any expertise in setting these standards in such a way that it will improve the education system.
Other than the fact that they're the boss and we want to do what we want to do and implement what we want to do. So,
but they're not the boss.
Right.
They do this because we let them. We are the boss. In America, it is the people to whom the power belongs, and the government can only do this to us if parents sit back and students sit back and let it happen. Every parent, every student, every teacher should be doing this to the federal and state government, saying, no, this will not stand. We want control at the local level because we are a country of the people, by the people, and for the people. We are the boss, not the federal government.
See, with Race to the Top, it actually almost sounds like a lottery system.
Well, actually, to some extent it was. I mean, stand in line and get your money. There were incentives to sign up early. And in fact, some of the states that signed up for Race to the Top did so without any knowledge as to exactly what the implications were of adopting Common Core. Before I'm going to take and adopt a system that's going to totally revamp education standards across my entire state, I think I'd want to have teachers and professors and parents analyze this, review this, and make an informed decision. I'm not aware of any such process. They saw the money, they took the money, and ex post facto, after the fact, they are now trying to justify the taking of the money by creating explanations after the fact as to why they think it might be good. And their justifications to ring hollow. They have no credibility.
Wow. And also, I want to touch upon the fact that you had talked about assessments. I was a teacher, okay, and I know that anytime you have a state assessment coming along, the teacher feels compelled to teach to the test, and they feel compelled to ignore all the other subjects other than the fact just to teach to the test, just to get their students to pass the test. And I personally have a problem with that because kids really aren't learning anything. They're not learning their subjects. And you had talked about the assessment part of this. And my question is to you, I guess under Common Core, there are a lot more of these assessments, correct?
Yes, and they're expensive. $30 per student, for every student in the United States. There are a lot of these assessments. Everything will be based on these assessments, and worse yet, it threatens the autonomy of the non-public school systems. Because once these Common Core standards are put in place, our students in homeschool, our students in private schools, our students in parochial schools that want to enter college will have to adhere to some of the same testing, or they will not get into college. And that really threatens the freedom of the non-public education system in America today.
future of Common Core? Do you think it will survive?
Well, it wasn't well justified. We see several states trying to peel off right now. And I believe unless Mr. Obama is successful in implementing this during his term, I suspect it may crumble with whoever is elected president next. I pray that it crumbles, because the federalization of education is one of the greatest threats to a free society.
That's true. And our viewers know that I particularly homeschooled my kids. And they also know that I have a master's in education, and I've said before that I've taught in public schools, and now I homeschool my own children for at least the first 7 years. And I will not ever regret anything like that,
Right.
because it gives me the power to choose what my kids need to learn. And I enjoy doing that. And we also mentioned a group called the Transformative Studies Institute.
Mm-hmm.
And I know them well at the professor level.
Yep.
They are professors that are mostly in the humanities area who devise these, shall we say, initiatives for the education. And they want everybody to follow them because they particularly believe that they're right.
Of course. Of course.
Uh-huh. And you had also mentioned that Common Core talks about transformation too. Transformation is a nice word.
Well, let's talk about that. And I'm looking at a chart right here on transformative qualities. And I want to say two things about this. Number one, it raises the obvious question: transformation from what into what? See, every parent should be asking the question, what are they trying to transform my child into? And the two comments with respect to that are, number one, if you go to the Transformation Studies Institute, they tell us on their website what they stand for. They stand for something they refer to as social justice. And then if we go to Iowa State University's A to Z Sustainability Library, there is a definition of what social justice is. And what it says is that social justice is, quote, economic egalitarianism, which also involves the redistribution of income and the redistribution of property. Well, ladies and gentlemen, teachers, students, parents out there that are watching this, let me tell you what that is a euphemism for. That's simply a phrase for Marxism.
Mm-hmm.
That's a phrase for redistribution. That's what communists do. And that, in fact, is what they're moving at towards transformative qualities. And if you don't believe me, sometimes I've always said, you can tell more about what somebody believes by what they don't tell you than what they do tell you. And we look at transformative qualities. They talk about leadership and ways of learning and global citizen this and global citizen that, but the things that you will never see, the things that you will never see on this list about the transformative qualities are any discussions about free markets, capitalism, the Constitution, individual rights, and certainly no reference to God whatsoever.
Right, because it's totally based on the collective.
That's correct.
Okay, you were born into a society. That's how the communist society is. You were born into a society of the collective.
Right.
Okay, and it doesn't talk about family values.
No.
And the whole bit. And I know at the college level, the transformational studies groups consist of a lot of professors from the humanities, and they don't want to have anything to do with the Constitution, because according to them, in their world, the Constitution doesn't work.
Yeah, well, let's be careful here. Let me just interrupt. I want to be careful not to take this too far and have the defenders of Common Core saying that we are calling them communists. We are not. What my point is that the policies that they are advocating are suspiciously identical. And that's the problem. And if they study political philosophy, they study the likes of Karl Marx, they will recognize that their requirements, their requests for social justice and whatnot are in fact derivatives of a Marxist political ideology.
Right. And I also want to talk about the fact to see what you guys are doing to stop Common Core.
Well, we're doing several things. First and foremost, everything begins with education, because unfortunately so much of what our government feeds us these days is propaganda. I can't tell you, I've made comments that when certain government agencies, if their lips are moving, they're lying, unfortunately. And it starts with education. It starts with information. We have citizens groups forming around the county and around the state. Carroll County will be having an education forum some point in the next few months, and we will give provide an opportunity for all sides to examine Common Core, the pluses and the minuses, in an attempt to fully educate our parents so they make a fully informed decision. But again, I do want to emphasize to parents, whether you like what's being taught or not, remember this. This means the taking of control away from your local community, investing it with he who has the gold, and that is the federal government.
Do you get a lot of parent participation around here in your community?
I think we have an active parent community, especially in the education side, but our parents are still coming up to speed, and that a lot of them don't understand the implications of Common Core yet. And I hope when they see videos like this, they'll begin to wake up, because we need them to become activists in defense of the freedom to have their children educated the way they want, not the way the federal government wants.
Could it be that a lot of the parents are too busy with their kids? One's going to soccer game, another one's going here. If there was a two-parent household, so by the time they come home from their jobs, they're tired.
Well, yes.
Unfortunately.
And that's one of the problems. The people in government are activists, especially on the left. They're activists. And parents in rural communities tend to be hardworking, salt-of-the-earth folks. They leave at 7 o'clock in the morning. They get home at 7 in the evening. They don't have time to do this. But they need to make time to understand what Common Core is all about so that they can protect their children's futures.
Do you encourage them to go to your website and
I would encourage
like
them to go through a more objective analysis. I would go to using their search engine of choice and simply research Common Core and see what other states have to say about it. There are many people who are involved in the Common Core who are heavy critics of it. Very few teachers involved. Very few teachers, and several people that were on the certification committee refused to certify it. So there are people that were actually insiders that said this is bad. But that information is not getting out because the government is already using its powers of propaganda to only release the information that they want our parents to know.
Right, and I mentioned before, it's bad because they give you a standard, the objectives are standard, and when you have a class of 20 kids with diversity and kids learning different, it's very difficult to standardize everything. You have to adjust your teaching ability to the student.
I mean, what you're really saying, Doreen, is that does one side fit all? Is that an appropriate paradigm for developing curriculum? And I would say no. The fact of the matter is every child is different, every teacher is different, and the more we work towards a system that puts increased structure into that and ties their hands, the less effective our teachers will be when they are unable to adjust their teaching approach to meet the needs of children with unique requirements.
Can you tell us or give us some better alternatives to fix our education system?
Yes.
Okay.
Education competition. We know in every industry we look at, whether it's automobiles, whether it's colleges, whether it's MP3 players or laptop computers that our children use, that competition breeds excellence. America as a country needs to move towards education choice. Our parents should have the option of taking a level of taxpayer funding, whether it be in the form of a tax credit or a voucher, and choosing between public schools, private schools, parochial schools, home schools. When public schools have to compete for students, they will teach what our communities want. But when public schools have a monopoly, they will teach what government wants. Competition is to an institution what exercise is to an athlete. It makes them leaner, meaner, and more effective. And without competition, we can never expect any institution of government, be it schools, be it medical care, be it your local motor vehicle administration, to operate as efficiently as it would if it had to compete with other organizations.
And you'd mentioned homeschool.
Yes, I do.
Are you guys doing a special program?
Yes, Carroll County has taken a leadership position in the state of Maryland. We believe that education, I believe as a commissioner, that education choice is what's best for our parents. Our parents should decide where our children go to school and not a zip code. To that end, we have created a $400,000 fund in Carroll County called the Education Opportunity Fund, and that is available to parents of non-public schools non-public school children, I should say, in order to enrich the education experience of children who were going to private, parochial, and home schools.
Wow. I don't know if we have that in New Jersey.
We'll work on it.
Right, right. And also you mentioned, are you running for office?
Not right now, I'm not. I'm currently a
Put your
commissioner.
hat in the,
I have a year and a half to go, and we'll see. I will do what the people of Carroll County want me to do. If they want me to run again, then I will consider running again. If they don't, then I'll be perfectly happy to resume my role as an individual citizen running a company in the private sector.
And I know you had wanted to ask me something. Go ahead.
Well, you have actually credentials that are better than mine with respect to education. You have a master's degree. You've been a homeschool mom. What is your view of Common Core, and what would you say your greatest concerns are as someone who's professionally educated in that regard?
I just don't see it working at all. And because I've been in the classroom, and I know what it's like dealing with 20 kids, and when you have to bring those objectives to each student, I just don't see it working. I actually had modified many of the objectives that were already handed down to me.
Right.
So it just blows my mind that something like this could pass.
Well, I hear concerns like that from lots of professional educators. I mean, I think they're nervous about speaking up. When their Board of Education or superintendent adopts Common Core, I think they feel they have to fall into line. This is the problem with all government programs, and this is the problem with government. Once the manager or executive above you in government chooses a path, if you resist, you risk your career potentially. But when I meet parents and teachers one-on-one, professional educators, they share the same common concerns, that this is not going to make things better, it's going to create problems for them because
you can't generalize. That's just
correct.
it.
That's correct.
In any place.
Right.
So, but my future goals are to go on and get my doctorate in education. And with everybody knowing who I am, I don't know if I'll get a job. Maybe I will. Okay, but if I don't,
well, maybe you could get a job working for the National Governors Association or Chief State School Officers preparing curriculum. Oh no, well you see, that's probably not going to happen because these organizations were not subject to open meetings laws. We don't really know exactly how people were selected to prepare this curriculum. We don't know whether it was a cross-section of the political spectrum, people on the left, people on the right, people that believe in God, people that don't believe in God. We don't even know. See, that's the problem with this whole thing. This is not the kind of endeavor that you expect to see in a constitutional republic of government by the people. This is a top-down government mandate disguised. It is disguised as a voluntary effort, but it is an end run around federal laws.
Right. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Rothschild, for joining us today.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank our viewers for watching us. And for more information on our show, please go to campusteaparties.com. That's campusteaparties.com. Thank you.
Thank you.